iScope Media. We currently know the Russia-Ukraine crisis that is going on and how effectively it has actually affected internationally. But today we are talking about why is India not taking any side in Ukraine-Russia crisis. Well, India can presently be likened to be a bewildered and perplexed rabbit caught in the highlights of two of its strategic and defense allies, Russia and the US, both of who are demanding its commitment to their hostile lineup on warring sides over the former military invasion of Ukraine. Well, India's predicament just sharpened following its decision to abstain at the UN Security Council when a US-sponsored resolution condemning Russia was put to vote on Friday in New York time. Security analysts, diplomats, and senior services personnel believe that New Delhi's paradoxical predicament presents hugely uncertain outcomes in which it is likely to get badly scalded. But it remains to be seen over the next few days how severely it gets sinked as it plays out its poor hand in the high-stakes poker game underway in Ukraine, Moscow, Washington, and several other European and world capitals. The choices for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government remain stark against the backdrop of the Indian Army's continuing standoff with China along the disputed line of the actual control or the LAC in eastern Ladakh, and also with regard to India's future long-term security alliances. While condemning Russia for its ongoing offensive against Ukraine by land, sea and air and backing the harsh US-led sanctions against Moscow runs the assured risk of India annoying a dependable ally and long-standing material supplier, albeit with close ties to China. Not doing so would similarly aggravate a strategic partner and defense equipment provider Washington, which is also a quadrilateral partner along with Australia and Japan. The US had also ably supported Delhi over its Ladakh impasse, in addition to being a close naval collaborator in the Indo-Pacific region. Now let's have a look at a grim Hobson's choice. Regrettably, however, much to Modi government's discomfiture, settling for India's time-worn strategic autonomy option of equitably balancing its strategic, military, political and diplomatic relations with Moscow and Washington simply does not appear to be the default option anymore. Ironically, the prevailing fraught circumstances with limited alternatives present India with the hackneyed fait accompli of whether it is with US or with Russia. Both possibilities are simply unacceptable. Serving and retired military officers in Delhi claimed the Ukraine's annexation by Russia had, without doubt, put India in the unenviable and pincer-like situation of the damned of it condemned Russia for its Ukraine misadventure and damned by Washington and its NATO allies if it did not. It is a poison chalice-like situation for India, said retired Brigadier Rahul Bhonsle of the Security Risks Consultancy Group in Delhi. It faces a grim Hobson's choice in this crisis and has to tread warily to try and find to compromise a solution with which to be difficult to obtain, he added. In his telephonic conversation with President Vladimir Putin on Thursday, Modi had incredulously called for restraint and honest and sincere dialogue at a juncture when Russian tanks, artillery and ground troops had already encircled the Ukrainian capital Kyiv and firefights in the streets were audible in television reports. Russian combat aircraft and attack helicopters circle the skies overhead, leaving no doubt that Russia's sole goal is Ukraine's eventual annexation. The time for Modi's suggestion for conciliation and negotiation seemed long past as Putin was already headed for the finish. Ukraine's ambassador to Delhi too expressed his deep dissatisfaction with India's non-committal position on the Russian invasion and called upon Modi to prevail upon Putin to end hostilities. We are waiting, we are asking, we are pleading for the strong voice of India, Ambassador Igor Polka said agencies. The Ukrainian ambassador, it seems, will have to wait. US congressmen in Washington, interviewed by few sources, too echoed analog views, criticizing India for neither condemning the military intervention nor supporting the subsequent sanctions. One congressman even paired India with China in this regard as one of the two major countries who had neither denounced Russia's military campaign nor backed the ensuing embargoes. China's stance he referred to was understandable as it was Russia's close ally but not India's, which was a democracy. Now let's move on and have a look at what road is ahead for India. But like the previous rabbit, India's alternative in Ukrainian calamity are daunting as sanctions on Russia would most certainly impinge on its military's operational readiness, while supporting Washington's stand would in no way alleviate the situation, only exaggerate it. The US-led embargoes on Russia would most definitely impact the imminent transfer to India of 4 or 5 Russian Almaz anti-S-400 Triumph self-propelled surface-to-air missile system it had ordered in 2018 for deployment along the LSE and over 20,000 Lashnikov AK-204 assault rifles, badly needed by Indian Army units in Ladakh and other employed on the country insurgency operations in Kashmir. Sanctions would also stem the supply of assorted Russian missiles, ammunitions, ordnance, spares and components essential to keep the Indian Army's predominantly Russian platforms operative. Indian Army officers warned that his paucity would prove that worrisome in upcoming summer months along the LSE in Ladakh when the snows had melted and an emboldened PLA, aware of its rivals' handicaps, re-emerged as a palpable threat. And if these sanctions endured, which by all indications they would, considering Moscow's aim to eventually occupy Ukraine, the transfer to the Indian Navy of 4 Admiral Grigorovich project 1,135.6 M stealth frigates, 2 of which are being built in Russia and 2 indigenously under the technology transfer and leasing of one more Akulka class nuclear powered submarine would be endangered, if not altogether terminated. Alongside the export to India of critically components and sub-assemblies of the Indo-Russian BrahMos cruise missile, for which India had recently bagged $375 million order from Philippines, too would be imperiled and could be scrapped. Over the past 2 decades, in which India has acquired almost $20 billion worth of US defense equipment, Delhi had managed to balance its strategic and defense ties equitably between Moscow and Washington. The latter had turned a Nelson's eye to India acquiring Russian military hardware, provided Delhi also placed adequate orders for US equipment, which it did. Under this unstated accommodative agreement, the US had also desisted from sanctioning India for recently employing in Punjab its first S-400 system under its Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act enacted in 2017. The act was aimed at penalizing almost all Russian military design and production units, amongst other facilities, for its annexation of Crimea and for reportedly interfering in the US presidential elections 2 years later. So far, CATSA has been invoked against China and Turkey for installing S-400 system, but Delhi seemed to have been provided a silent waiver, with Washington making occasionally anonymous references to the matter and little else. Furthermore, industry officials said that in anticipation of Washington's pick and displeasure over acquiring the S-400, India's Ministry of Defense had in July 2018 quietly approved the $1 billion import from US of Raytheon's National Advanced Surface of Air Missile System 2 for the Indian Air Force to fortify the country's missile defense shield over Delhi. Thereafter, the MOD also sanctioned the $3 billion import of 30 weaponized General Atomics Aeronautical Systems (INC) Sea Guardian unmanned aerial vehicles that were to be divided equally between the three services. However, both these placatory buys have since been shelved, and with the Ukraine crisis erupting, it is quite likely that an agitated and frustrated US would in all likelihood end up sanctioning India over the S-400, as it was in the pipeline easy to accomplish and would hurt Russia. If so, it would only intensify Delhi's prevailing vacillation and overall sense of simply not knowing what to do. Well, now you have a clear picture of why India is not taking any sides in the Ukraine-Russia crisis. Stay with us, we'll bring you more important topics to talk upon. This is Aparna Singh reporting for iScope Media.